So I always like, so we're recording now, so I always like to open it up to you first for any questions right up front that you may have or want answered or discussed.
How many questions do you have, Connie? Because what I'm going to do, I'm thinking that maybe I should throw out a couple, and then it'll be your turn because I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, good.
Okay, so I'm looking at like our second project, and I think we've talked about the second project as far as being able to evaluate the instruction that I currently do. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm new to it. I've been doing this for about 4 weeks. So the program itself is fairly new to me. So I'm kind of learning as I go. But as I'm learning about it as I go, I'm basically, as I read the book and looking at to evaluate it, I'm wondering if I'm like biting too much off before I can actually chew this appropriately, because it's a lot of material. So I want to make sure that I am looking at the forest and not analyzing every single tree, as we talked about.
Okay.
So basically looking at the reporting process, and I'm just going to jump to that because that's kind of what I'm looking at, starting to gather some of the data and how I'm going to report it and who my audience is. And I'm going to just make the assumption that the audience is going to be the board of directors who wants to get an idea of how this particular program works. Okay. So what I'm thinking is the way to do that is like, how will I analyze the data? And that's the first part of that. Analyzing the data for me, having read the book, is basically what's coming back in the different surveys. And that's a lot of surveys. That's a lot of tests. It's a lot of information. And I'm not sure if it would be a good report for this particular exercise for me to summarize, where they started, where they began with some of their testing and quizzes. Because what I can do is I can group the quizzes, which gives us an idea as to where they're struggling, so we can review it so that then they can...
Can I pause for a minute?
Sure, please.
Because sometimes it's important just to pause, especially when you got a big thing you're looking at, and it looks like a big project. I guess the question would be, what does that board care about that you can connect to in your level 2? Because you do a pre and a post, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not, you're a nonprofit, so it sounds like, and I'm just guessing here, it sounds like that they actually care about the people that they're serving.
Right,
so
sure.
They want to see, this is where we started with a person, this is where we ended with this person. You could do that with a level 2 to show their amount of learning.
Okay.
You can compare a pre and a post, and you could compare a lot of qualitative data where, this person came in with poor posture, because looks are a big deal in the banking world, as you've stated, so you can look at the evaluation from that perspective as far as how you would report it. So what's important to that board? Is it the growth of their people for level 2? What is it? And then connect with that. So don't get caught up in the individual quizzes as much.
Right. Yeah. And I think and I'm so sorry about the beeping. It's like nothing happened all day, but now we've got this truck here. So, but anyway, my concern was basically making sure that I'm not putting so much that it'll be insurmountable. So I want to make sure then that I am covering the progress. So a person who comes in, first of all, I guess a person who comes in with not meeting expectations for a 7th grade math level. They go through tutoring, they complete that, they pass it, therefore they've met that prerequisite. In addition to that, being able to show up on time with all their assignments.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It is a really big deal.
Yeah.
Some people lose jobs over that. And sometimes I don't think they recognize in some instances that it's actually important.
Right. If nobody ever lets you know, how do you know?
No, it's true.
Yeah.
So I think those will give me some great measurements. Now, if I'm understanding, like my thought process, though now it's scaling down a bit, is that reporting process. I was thinking of kind of creating that as a table where we're looking at the individuals, where the pre-behaviors, pre-testing, to post behaviors and post-testing, to kind of give us an answer, give us an idea of kind of where they're at.
Okay. Tables work well. They're a great tool. Graphs are a great tool. Data plots are great tools. We have a lot of great tools. The way I would like you to answer that question, though, is A, what are the folks that this is going to be presented to used to seeing? And B, how can you make it, how can you display it so it makes an impact on them? Because that's what you want to do with the data.
Okay, so ultimately, so if I can do, if I can create a very straightforward, short PowerPoint with the tables and the results, that would probably be better than a report, a 4-page document.
Yeah, like for instance, we had training. We had people who the term was off the street. They were just people who haven't been trained in how to build composites, and they weren't hired into a company yet. So when they went through our training program, they ended up working in the company in the composite build-up shop, and we needed to display how our program shifted people from no knowledge of this to actually being effective in the shop. And we had to report to directors and above, and those folks are so busy, everything was a graph with a bullet title line, and they said, oh, okay, so my quality assurance rates have gone up even though I have all these new people, things like that. So they had very limited time. They didn't really care about an email from George Hanshaw.
Right.
But then they started to,
Yeah.
then they started to see the data that was there, and they could get it real quick. So I noticed 2 things happened. First, they appreciated it. Second, they started a communication with me. So by me making it very simple and easy for them, which was hard because I had to take that data and kind of mess with it and talk to a lot of people, get a lot of opinions that I may or may not wanted to hear because I was busy too.
Right, sure.
To do it that way. So believe it or not, in the data, it's very important that we kind of meet their expectations and then exceed them.
Okay.
If you want to make that big impact. And that's especially true as we're in level 1 and 2 now. We can start doing that pretty good with 2. We can do that to some extent with 1, but as we go into 3 and 4, we could really come up with some ways to just, wow. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Yeah, that definitely helps.
Yes.
Because it's overall my biggest challenge is looking, like I said, at the book itself. The process is 8 weeks of 8-hour days, 3 times a week. So that's a lot of information to try to bring down and say, oh, this is where we got started this person at, and this is where they ended up. And honestly, I think it all ends when the participant sends us a fax or an email of their first pay stub. That's where
awesome.
We need to see that.
That's a wonderful end. That's a wow kind of ending.
It is.
So it really is. Somebody who never thought a day in their life they could do something like that.
Right.
So actually showing you a pay stub, that's fantastic. We want to be able to capture that and give everybody else the feeling that they have.
Right.
And to do that, to be good at evaluation, we have to be real good at simplifying. Is the bottom line.
And I don't know about you, Connie, but for me, it's like I'm always thinking, oh, more and more and more. Maybe they'll get it. Maybe it'll be better if they see more. And that's really not the case. I need to pull back from that because it can be it can be detrimental to me because then I'm just about gathering stuff rather than learning through the process, and it becomes overwhelming.
Right. Think of it. Here's the best thing that ever helped me with evaluation. And it's a silly analogy, but boy, did it help. Okay. So think of, there's a lot of ADD that runs in my family. So we got a ton of it. When we all get together, it's just crazy. But think about somebody who they're hearing noise in their headset, like an old TV when you used to have the snow on it, they would call, and just, and then now make it blurry, and your evaluation is behind all that. So you have to find a way to bring it from behind all that, to bring it in front of all that so it makes sense. And if you add more noise, it's never going to come in front of all that noise. It's just going to get lost in the snow. And that's kind of how we all approach each other in my family. We try to make the least amount of noise because we're all hearing the noise all the time.
Right. Yeah, no, that definitely helps. And that actually, again, it just makes it that much more important to simplify it, be very, I'm going to say being very purposeful with the data and direct. So I'm not wasting their time and I'm not losing their attention for sure.
Right. And simple's hard.
It is.
Simple's hard. Simple's hard.
It is. So I'm going to take a pause there. If anything else comes up, I will.
Okay. Did I answer a question or did I just make nonsense?
Yes, you did. It helps me now narrow down as opposed to me looking at, probably over 50 evaluations, just kind of giving data.
Yeah.
Because we've got first, sometimes a couple of quizzes, then a test, and that's just for one section. We've got like 20.
And before we move on, I'm going to put out there how, for everybody that's watching this on a recording, is how often have you been in a meeting where you just see data after data after data after data, and you simply no longer care, even though it might be important. You get that cognitive overload, and you just don't care anymore. You just want to leave, get your cup of coffee, and move on.
Right, sure. And I certainly don't want to do that. It's a really, really good program. It does have certain areas that need improvement for sure as I'm going through it. It definitely does, but it's still bringing really great results. So if we can improve from that, I can't see why we shouldn't.
And if you could show that in a powerful way, that's even better.
Right.
So, hey, Connie, do you have any questions on the stuff?
I was just kind of trying to think through my first couple parts of this, I guess. So I started typing and then I deleted a bunch and then I started typing something else. So
Fantastic.
I just wanted to clarify a little bit. So I kind of switched mine. I was going to do the textbook, but I decided to do some online trainings that Pearson has for the textbook for teachers.
Okay.
I thought that might be a little more valuable kind of at this point as we're learning to use the textbook. So I was trying to decide if I wanted to evaluate for Pearson, which I don't think I want to. I think I want to evaluate for like the school corporation or for the high school I work for. But I want to
I'm sorry, I banged my desk and I missed
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure that made sense, like that I'm evaluating for my school rather than for Pearson, making sure the training is effective for us.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's talk about that point, because that's a key point. Because if you were evaluating for Pearson, no way could you bring that data over to your school. It just doesn't fit.
Right.
So knowing who you're evaluating for is that's critical.
Yeah. And I had started with Pearson, but nothing was fitting together the way I wanted it to, and that's where I ended up deleting most of what I had and kind of reevaluating what I was doing.
And thank you for bringing that up, because that is a great point. Because even when we're designing evaluations for a program we're building or anything like that, what you just went through is part of the process that we all go through. You will continue to just hit that delete key no matter how good you get at this. So that's important to know that you're gonna go and you're gonna have a concept and a thought flow, and then sometimes it's just gonna change. And it's because if you're like me, you could start going off on a tangent, and then you got to kind of reel yourself back in a little bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up, because mistakes are always welcome, and we never fail because we never stop. So we just keep rolling, right?
Yeah.
That's part of the design deal. Just keep going. So thank you for bringing that up. That's hugely important. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I'm going to jump into our rubric real quick, just see if there's anything. Did you happen to get to watch the little video that I put out for the announcement?
I did.
Yeah.
Okay. Did that help? Was it convoluted? Because I know I can convolute sometimes.
It's that when you were talking about specifically in the rubric, the reporting process, that's really kind of where I started looking at more of the detail to say, am I going in the right direction? So as you were giving a little more detail on that, excuse me, it really helped me think like, oh, I'm going to have to ask this question, because otherwise it just becomes overwhelming. So it definitely helps me stay on the right track. Thankfully, I appreciate you doing that, because I think the most important thing is to be able to know how to meet the expectation of this particular assignment, if you will, because there's a lot of different components, but I want to make sure that we meet the most important ones. Not that the others are not, but if I'm off on something else, the whole project will be, the whole assignment will be off. So that really does help me.
Okay.
Going back to that reporting process real quick, there was a section there where you talked about the appendices and instruments. Mm-hmm. So in that particular section, again, I have so many different forms. I'm trying to find out, for this particular exercise, what are we looking for that would satisfy meeting these goals for, if you will, to evaluate, let's say, for the board of directors.
Okay, so level 1 and 2, I know you have a ton of those, but hone in on that one piece, like you said, the math.
Mm-hmm.
What do you?
Seventh grade, yeah, it's this 7th grade level evaluation.
Okay, so the math
yep.
evaluation. So if you want to focus on that piece,
it's a math
focus
competency.
on that piece.
Yep.
Yeah. So don't go out to all the other stuff that you have for this particular piece.
Okay, and as far as the math competency, that'll be probably on a little easier for us to evaluate, and I'll have the exam that I can present as basically as part of the instrument. Okay. Now, how would I be able to, because I think this is really important, how would I be able to present other than just kind of a visual report as to how our participants start with attitudes, punctuality, responsibility, other than, presenting like grades. We do keep track of who shows up a little bit late, who hands in homework, who doesn't, and those are evaluated on a separate sheet. It's not something that is separate. It's kind of the way we keep track to make sure to have conversations with them, and those how we set up like warnings to let them know they're about to lose their spot. But how do we present that option where we do see attitude issues, but then we see attitude adjustments towards the end? Okay.
Now the answer to that is, how do you measure it? Is it a qualitative thing where you're just making that a subjective call, which is okay?
It's a subjective call, basically. Okay. Some of them are subjective. The other I'm going to say is, it's 9:00. Literally, by the time session is ready to go, it's 8:59. I'm ready with my roster. Whomever is seated, the minute that my my alarm goes off on my phone, those people are considered on time, so to speak.
Okay.
Anyone after that, even if they were in the room but they're not seated, they're considered late. So it's I mean, it's pretty subjective, so to speak. It's not the same thing with the way they come in dressed appropriately professional. Again, that's pretty subjective. What's professional in one environment may not be for another.
So how do you gather?
Us, it's pretty straightforward.
How do you gather those evaluations?
So for those evaluations, it's pretty much kind of a conversation. They haven't had a form. They haven't set up any forms in particular. It's more of the they showed up with denim. We have to have a conversation with them.
Okay, then here's why it might seem a little confusing to you, because you don't have an evaluation set up.
True.
So that's what you need in order to present out. So you need to know how to.
Okay.
You're having these great conversations, and to be honest with you, this is just part of the growth process for many schools/businesses. You have some great people running it. You go forward, you make a lot of impact, but now we have to kind of bring the paperwork up so we can qualify and quantify what we're doing. Yeah. So you're just missing, it sounds like to me that you're missing the evaluation.
Oh yeah, there's nothing that we can gauge it by to see.
So you can't really report it until you find out how to evaluate it.
Right. And the interesting thing is, like I mentioned to you, one of our participants, finally got the fact that jeans was not appropriate. He graduated, wore his suit, did everything fine. He shows up to an interview and he's not appropriately dressed, which completely threw off his interviewer. Right. So you're thinking, what part of that did he not get? What part of that, what can we learn from that? Or was it just a personal decision on his part to not be appropriately dressed for an interview? Thankfully for him, like I said, he went back. Yeah. And he went back and I said, it's right down the road. Go for a walk. And he did. And he spoke to the person who interviewed him. And he was, I'm going to say, gracious enough to tell him, this is what threw me off. You weren't appropriately dressed to come in and be interviewed for a banking position. And not that it was bad or inappropriate, it just wasn't at the level that we expected. We wanted to see you the way you were dressed at graduation. Shirt, tie, jacket.
Yep. That's
it. So I think the fact that he got that huge opportunity for growth, and just that's one in very few. He's certainly taking advantage of that for another interview that I'm sure will line up. But we don't have a measuring thing. And I think that as we're talking, I'm thinking, I think this would be something even as a checklist to hand to them, because we give them a bunch of materials to refer to and say, hey, double check the night before that you've got your tie, you've got, for men, your tie, your shirt press, your jacket, all that up. Same thing with ladies, your pantyhose, your skirt is pressed, your blouse, all of that stuff is ready. And it seems as though it should be unnecessary, but it really isn't. There's so many times where my kids think it's silly for them. Like, why do you even have to do that sort of thing? Now my daughters are young adults. I said, but they don't get the fact that people didn't grow up like them, where they went to a Christian school and they had a uniform, but they learned to wear the appropriate attire based on that uniform. And if it wasn't appropriate, they would have that conversation with the principal or the teacher or whatever. But on a daily basis, I'm thinking as we're talking about it, that I can actually provide a form that would be useful to them down the road, that they can just check off those boxes for personal use as a tool.
Use that as an evaluation tool.
Yeah, for themselves even, for us, to see where we're at, and for them to use it themselves. And I think self-evaluation is really strong and powerful, because you can take a hard look and say, this is not appropriately pressed, or at least it gives you an opportunity to fix it before you're in a situation like that. So thank you for that. That just opened up a whole new opportunity. Yes.
So that's something that we run across a lot in multiple places is you want to report, you want to show this data, but you don't really have the tool to gather it yet, you know.
Yep.
And you're not thinking that you don't have the tool yet, so it starts to get confused on how you can report and everything else. But it's because you're not getting it all, even
Right.
though you are getting it because you do the discussions and you do all of this. You know, it's all here, but it's not in a way that you can report it out. Yeah. So
Right.
that's
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you for bringing that up because that's
Yeah, no,
yeah.
that'll be helpful to me too.
And Connie,
Yes.
you got anything about the project or anything? Because you're doing the e-learning module now for the textbook
Yes.
for your folks, and I want to say you're doing sophomores. Are you doing sophomores?
I teach sophomores, yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
The training modules will be geared towards the teachers of the sophomores. So,
So who are you going to present the evaluations to? Who would be your audience for that?
I think my department head and the administration would probably be the biggest audience to that. And then I think that the students, of course, would then benefit from it later as stakeholders.
Okay, and you kind of have an idea of how they like to see things already?
Not this kind of data, no.
Okay, well that's good. That's good. That gives us opportunity.
Yeah, I've helped develop some like professional development surveys in the past, so I was kind of going to set it up like that, but using some of the tools we've used about making it shorter and more concise and clearly worded and that type of thing. Because I feel like the ones I've helped with in the past have been way too long and asking the same questions over and over and just not clear.
Yeah, I did want to make a quick comment. One of the things I really enjoy about the discussion boards when we are sharing information and being able to comment and peer feedback, and right now with this conversation with you, Connie, one of the things you said in one of our last session was you included the students as the stakeholders. And I actually never thought about that. And that just gave me like a totally different perspective, because our participants are, again, either underemployed or unemployed, or, you know, people who are just starting to get back on their feet for whatever reason. And they are taking 8 hours of their day, and some of them travel for up to 2 hours to get to us.
Wow.
For the free training that we provide. And they are absolutely the stakeholders. And I never viewed it that way until when you mentioned students. I'm thinking, I wonder how is it that she's viewing that? And again, reading the materials, there's still a lot. It gives me a very different perspective as to why this particular evaluation we're talking about is as to how they're growing personally. Really makes them a huge part of this program and why they have become the stakeholders that I just never saw it before. So I appreciate your input because it really helps in the perspective and being able to come up with good measurement tools so that everybody's benefiting all the time with all this effort that is put into it.
Yeah, I think that's always our ultimate goal is, or question is, how is this going to help the students at some point? So that's something we always focus on.
Right. And that was the reason for the existence of this particular, this organization started, from the Depression to help people build skills and, tools to be able to get employment, et cetera. So they've been doing this for a long, long time. We just are using different tools and different means for different types of jobs that provide them the ability to at least get started back into the working community. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
So to piggyback on that, so if you use that student-centered perspective, your self-evaluation checklist you're thinking about making is a perfect fit. And then you think, okay, I want to do this, but it's going to take effort. Should I take this time and effort to do this? Absolutely, because it's going to benefit the student, which is who we're looking for in your case.
Yep.
So good puts. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to any feedback I get on that. We'll see.
Yeah. All right. So I I think I interrupted one of your comments, Connie. Did I interrupt you and you wanted to say something?
If you did, I don't remember, so that's okay.
Oh, okay. So I'm not in trouble then. That's good.
No.
I hope I didn't. Sorry about that if I did.
No, you're fine.
No.
Thinking ahead a little bit.
Sometimes I get to thinking something and I just blurt out hesitating. And I do that a lot. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't do that. Okay. So then we do have the peer reviews going on in our discussions. That's going to be a fantastic opportunity because as IDs and evaluators and everything else, the more that we can peer review and learn how to give good feedback. And the only way, to me, the best way to learn how to give good feedback is give good feedback, to look from the perspective that you're going to give it from. So I would say as you're doing that, look from the perspective that we're taking now. So somebody's giving you their evaluations and what they want to do and how they want to do it. If we could just take a moment, we're not intimately involved with whatever the topic is. So that gives us the ability to be zoomed out and really look from the perspective of why is that stuff meaningful? What is it meaningful for? So, and as you give the feedback, give it from that perspective of meaning and why do we care sort of thing. In a kind way, of course,
Sure.
Yeah, that's important because nobody ever likes to be told what they're doing is, whatever word we want to attach to it, adjective we want to attach to it. So, yeah, because what's nice about here is everybody is we're going in the same direction, but we're all looking at it from a different perspective. So what we all get from that, including myself, is we get that broader and broader perspective, which just helps what we do. So next time when I do an evaluation, it's going to be better, because it's going to be more encompassing, because that's what we want to do. We want to be able to encompass our specific audience, and then we want to be able to encompass them from their experiences as well. So that's a big deal, the way you are approaching this with your thoughts on learner-centered and what can we do for the student and things like that. So as we give feedback, let's think from that perspective as well. So,
okay.
For that.
Thank you.
So, wow, I talk too much for 1 o'clock. So the folks that are watching this recording probably turned me off quite a while ago. But in case they didn't, any last questions?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure they'll come up, but.
Okay, and always feel free to text, email, whatever, to get a hold of me. I appreciate you spending your time to come in and join in on these sessions because, that is your time. So
thank you. I appreciate you giving the sessions.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, me too. Me too. Every time I'll have the opportunity, I'll be here.
Okay, well, we'll keep crushing at lunchtime. All right. Well, have a good day then. And thank you.
See you, Connie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.